Agartha. When the fire first swept through the forest, it was a disaster, but nature has a way of always rebuilding. Over time, the ground would become fertile, and the trees would become lush with life once again. While we waited for such greenery to sprout, and for the wildlife to return to the scorched land, Saviors noticed that the area of ground had become soft. It wasn't until a large tree, one that suffered a fair amount of damage to its foundation fell over, that the ground really gave in. No one is sure if it always been there, or if the fire had somehow caused it, but a massive sinkhole formed near the center of the forest. The ground cracked and fell into a large dimple in the earth. Trees and foliage were pulled into a chasm that at the time of discovery had an undetermined depth. That's where I and my team came in, a group of experienced spellunkers and a handful of scientists were sent out to record the size of the sinkhole. It was intimidating standing there, peering into the sinkhole. I watched trails of dirt fall off the edge and tumble into the seemingly endless void, and I was tasked to plunge into. We were warned about the sensation before. The call of the void. The intrusive thought to just jump. When peering into uncertainty, among the scientists and spellunkers, I am the latter, and I rather experienced one as well. My eyes have fallen upon many cave systems and underground wonders, but never have I seen Earth open its maw so wide for me. Sights of the sinkhole's opening dwarfed me, making me feel so insignificant in its presence. I was in awe. The expedition hadn't even begun yet, and I was just standing at the rim with my equipment in a tow waiting for the others, when the ground beneath me had started shifting. I hadn't noticed it at first, when I was sinking, the horizon of Earth's open wound, rising higher and higher at my sight. Earth, where I stood, was being swallowed by the sinkhole. Turning around, I attempted to throw my line and to try to snag a tree or anything to anchor me. I should have already had that set up, but that wonder of it took me over. The surrounding area was too damaged to support me anyway. The earth took me with it and plunged us both into the great uncertainty that was the sinkhole. I never knew how I survived the fall. It felt like time had stopped as I plunged into the cavernous opening. Once I had fallen far enough that the light no longer reached me. It was like I was floating in space. If not for the feeling of my heart lifting to my throat, I could have been convinced that I only existed as a memory in those moments. Then, even my thoughts went blank, as my fall abruptly and painfully came to an end. Soft soil doesn't make for a soft landing when you have reached terminal velocity. In the darkness, it can be hard to tell when you're truly awake. I remember the impact and the internal agony that it caused, but as I lay there, fingers gently digging through the loose soil, I was bewildered to find that my body was free of pain. Laying there, I questioned if I had died, if my meeting with the ground would be my final pleasantry. The more time I'd spent laying on my bed of dirt, the more I could feel the cool area punctuating the small beads of sweat on my cheek, the more I could feel grains of dirt finding their way under my fingernails. Afraid of sudden movement and plagued with confusion, I moved my arms slowly, feeling dirt and rock rolling under them. With open palms, I braced myself and pushed away from the earth, conducting myself to stand up. Standing in the darkness, I felt the surprisingly cold air filling into my lungs, fueling my brain back to life. The gravity of my sensation must have been falling slower than me. Standing there, I could feel it returning to me, my heart racing and adrenaline pumping. I swiveled my body, trying to access my surroundings, despite the lack of light. Looking straight up, I could see a small pinprick of yellow light that looked more like a star in the night sky than a massive cavity I'd been observing earlier. The light was enough to remind me of the flashlight I had stored away in my backpack. If I'd survived the fall, then surely it could have as well. I tucked my backpack straps from around my arms and zipped the pouch open. The familiar sound of metal teeth separating filled the cavern and bounced off the walls, shifting noise into a hum. Reaching in my hands, scattering through various supplies. A bottle full of water I didn't yet need, and a phone I wasn't foolish enough to think would work from where I was. Stuff like that. Eventually, my fingers laced around the metal casing of a heavy-duty flashlight. Pulling back, I retrieved the tool and closed the backpack. The same hum echoed through me. Straps are wrapped around my back once more, and I attempted to turn the flashlight on. At first, it refused to cling to life, as I had, but after opening it up, it sang out its illuminant tone. A beam of light landed at my feet, highlighting my soft brown and grays on the floor beneath me. The beam was dimmer than I would have preferred. A light would occasionally flicker. No doubt, a product of the fall. I couldn't help but think of how cliché it was though. Surrounded by a dark and unfamiliar place, a flickering flashlight. Come on! Slowly twisted my wrist and body to shed the beam of light on the area surrounding me. It was like I was standing in a forest on the ground. I mean, I technically was. But the way so many trees were standing up straight made it feel like I had grown there. The hole where I stood was much bigger than the opening on top was. The beam of light was damaged as it was unable to penetrate the dark enough to land on wherever the walls were. Looking up once again, I tried to rationalize just how far down I was. If something like a helicopter could get enough rope down to pull me up, I didn't think that was an option. So I walked for a minute or so until I was met with the wall of chasm. Considering the possibility of climbing my way out, I tested the integrity of the wall. The soil was tender at places, where there were firm stones or anchors, with far and few between. Not to mention, I didn't know when the ground above me gave way again, sending the cascade of debris at me. It was a miracle I wasn't in pain, let alone even alive, at the thought of pounds of dirt sliming on top of me as I descended did not sit well with me. I could wait for them to come down to me, but there was no way they knew just how deep the hole was. I might have starved to death by the time they safely made it to me. One thing I've learned is that one of your best chances of survival is to remain calm, and although the panic was setting in, I couldn't allow myself to physically react to it. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs to the brim with oxygen. I listened to the sound of my own body pulling in the air. Once I couldn't drag any more in, I was surprised to find the soft whistle of rushing air hadn't subsided. I halted my breath for a moment, and sure enough, I could hear the current air running through the cavern. Pointing the flashlight at the ground, I carefully observed a loose mound of dirt. Watching it for a moment, I saw that the dirt was being manipulated by the air, small pieces rolling over each other. If there was air coming from the same level I was, then I figured there would have to be a tunnel nearby, and if there was a tunnel, possibly I could find another, safer method of ascension. I was just happy to have a play at a point, relieved at an actual cause of action. So I headed in the direction of the air, dictated by the retreating columns of dirt. Sure enough, as I stepped through the darkness, a circle of light illuminated the path ahead of me. I felt the tunnel's breath against my face. It was a cold and inviting, cold air could indicate the presence of water, and water always flows down. The air came in waves. It felt like the cave itself was breathing alongside me, keeping me company. After a while of walking, that settled in just how truly expansive the area I was falling into was. I came to the opening of the tunnel. I stood and peered into it, somewhat more intimidated by the mouth of the much smaller passage than I was of the massive sinkholes. Part of me was marveling at what nature could accomplish. The cave was almost manufactured. The opening was so perfectly circular, I momentarily pictured a massive worm eating its way through the dirt and rock. The tunnel's walls were smooth slates of rocks that seemed to continue in circular perfection, presented by the opening. Walking through the opening and into the tunnel, feeling the breath of cool, it continued pulsing onto me. I felt like a ferret running through a plastic tube. The walls of the tunnels had ridges, like a scrunched up bendy straw. The bendy parts, anyways. I didn't know if I felt better being in a small confined tunnel than I did when standing in a far open area of the chasm. At the very least, my flashlight was more affecting the tighter area, and I could see what was ahead of me. Every so often, the tunnel would twist into a different direction, but would never seem to be interrupted by unsettling rocks or dripping water. The light ahead of me, bouncing off gleaming stones, a clear path forward. The darkness behind me, swallowing up more space with each step I took. Both roads were mounting uncertainty, but I had to walk one of those roads, so onward I marched. Eventually, after what felt like maybe half an hour, time was really hard to get a firm grasp on down there. I came to a split of a tunnel, a fork on the road I travelled. One of the tunnels was marginally larger in diameter, and I surmised that the other smaller one must have led back to the chasm. As I sat and pondered, I heard something under the rushing air. It was similar to the sound, but different enough to be detectable. My feet melted with the stone beneath them. Have you ever been on a bus and heard the people around you whispering? You know they're not talking about you, but you can't hear what they're saying, so you don't know if they aren't. And the thought that they might be makes your heart dip. That's what it was like, as if I heard a whisper under the rush of the air, and something in me, like someone might be talking about me. I stood there with my flashlight aimed down at the larger tunnel, inexplicably waiting for someone to walk into the beam of light, while also having zero idea what to do if someone did. Whenever the flashlight would flicker, giving momentary lapses to the darkness, it looked like the shadows were physically retreating when the light returned. Panic. Panic. Run. No. Breathe. Take a breath. Sync up with the breath of the cavern. I convinced myself that being down in the dark, isolated from another living soul, would test the mettle of the sternest mind. You're hearing things. You're seeing things that cannot be seen because they are not real. All you can do is keep moving forward. So I did. One step. All you need is one step. Let the light you hold guide you away from the darkness behind you. It's all in your hands. Walking into a bigger cave, I continued to regulate my breath. I had to consider that oxygen levels would be low around me and that frantic breathing would cause issues for my progress. A while went by, as a larger tunnel continued on, and I worried about how long my flashlight was going to last. Furthermore, building pressure in my ears started to confirm that, slowly but surely, I was on a decline. I kept looking for more places in the tunnel to branch off and give an opportunity to climb, but the tunnel never changed. It stayed so perfect, the same texture from the very beginning. I thought it was impossible. What could have possibly caused the rocks to have a ball like that? I heard what sounded like rocks being thrown against the stone walls that surrounded me. The noise came from behind me, and not long after the sound under my feet shook and the sound of rushing water filled the tunnels. It was loud, a tsunami crashing against a building made of steel, loud. But it wasn't water. I knew the sound because I had heard it when I had fallen. More of the sinkhole was collapsing. Watching with the light, focused down in the direction I had come from, I listened to the waterfall of dirt and vegetation slamming against the same bed of soil I landed in. I considered, at that moment, walking back. Maybe there was something else I could do back there. Then the cool air that had been striking my neck offered a brief waft of warmth. It was unmistakable, the feeling of someone's hot breath on the back of your neck, looming over you. I gasped and swiveled. My flashlight was fast enough to catch the sight of a black mass fleeing around the bend of the tunnel. My face tightened, and I suddenly felt a swell of sickness and bill well up in my throat. The sound of crashing earth behind me and an oddity before me. Without thinking, without reason, I spoke softly. "Hello? Hello?" My voice left my mouth, and from that moment off, the noise I had nearly involuntarily produced was no longer my own. A moment of silence passed, and I heard the voice again. My voice repeated back at me, "Hello? Hello?" It was my voice, but it wasn't an echo. There was too much silence between the repetition. Then again, and again, my voice greeted me. "Hello? Hello? 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 Hello?" Over and over, my own words drilled into my head. The noise increasing in volume and rapping with each cycle. The sound was bouncing off the walls and increasing in intensity. Eventually, I was able to feel the bass of my words vibrating across my skin, like I was standing next to a subwoofers. The sound got so unbearably loud and intense that the walls around me started to shake. My skin and the tunnels themselves shivered in unison. The tunnels gave out before I did. Behind me, a one perfect section of clean rock cracked and crumbled. This decay of the path back to the cavern created a chain reaction as my voice tore away at the structure that led me there. I watched for far too long as the collapse gained ground on me, hoping beyond hope that it would stop. My mind ran a flutter with fight-or-flight response. But how do you fight in a collapsing tunnel? Panic. Panic. Run. Yes! At the sound of crumbling rocks and my voice that had at that point deteriorated into a high-pitched whine continued, I provided my body. It was the direction that I had seen a shape go down, but it was my only choice. I was not going to die down here. There was no fucking way I was going to let this tunnel kill me. I thought back to why I ever started exploring caves. I was always athletic in high school. I was respected among my peers on my track team. One of those peers and the reason I was invited to go exploring a nearby cave in my hometown. Something about going where so few had ever been before exhilarated me. It made my blood pump and filled my head with wonder. And once I felt it, I couldn't get enough. And I promised myself that whatever was ahead of me, I'd run through it without missing a beat. With the tunnel collapsing behind me, I lowered my frame. Nearly operating off memory, I gripped my flashlight tight and braced my feet. You never forget how to ride a bike, and you never forget how to kick off a proper sprint. I was ready to pounce. A large section of the tunnel smacked to a bare ground behind me, a smack that echoed, ringing in my ear. I was sent back to when the starting pistol would go off. I reacted in kind and exploded forward. Adrenaline had never coursed harder through my body. Everything else had shot out. Pumping my arms and kicking my legs became a mechanical response to the desire to live. The flashlight in my right hand, wavering up and down, and I pumped my arms, offering quick snapshots of the tunnel ahead of me. When had I started screaming? When had a hole left my mouth? Ankles pivoting to clear corners, maintaining as much speed as I could. My howl, I heard it just like when I had said hello earlier, echoed back at me. This time, however, my voice was not the only one. Several other tones and pitches of screaming mixed in with mine. Intrusive and alien screams of madness, where the soundtrack as I ran further and further down, and right there, at the height of my physical powers, at the catalyst of running high, I was reminded just how human I am. I could run forever, but the rest of forever was knocked away. It was impossible to slow down, and for the second time, my mind went completely blank as my head slammed into a wall. I woke up in the darkness, once again to cool air pressing against the beads of sweat that were trailing down my cheek. No, not sweat. Blood. I wasn't gifted a miracle twice. My impact with the flat surface had twisted my wrist and broken my nose, spilling hot crimson out. My chest had a stiff pain in it as well. No doubt damage to my lungs. Hello? Hello? I heard my voice repeating again, outside of my body. Recreation of my voice. Jiggling a flashlight and hearing the batteries rattle around inside. The beam came to life. I pointed it up and saw the collapsed tunnel. I must have spun around from the impact. Rock was toppled on top of me. More rock, and there was no way I could fathom getting through it. My only choice was behind me. I and the flashlight turned to face the hard surface that had knocked me on the floor. Thoughts and theories in my head were completely flushed out, and the flashlight landed on a small brass handle. A handle attached to a completely unassuming brown wooden door. I would have thought I was dreaming, but the consistent pain that radiated through my body, getting worse as my adrenaline wore off, was the teether of the waking world. What else could I have done? What else was there than to open the door? I reached forward and placed my fingers around the handle as I rested my head against the wooden door, catching my breath. A small bead of blood dripped from my nose and plopped against the back of my hand. I stared at the bead as it made its way down to the floor. A heavy sigh later, the door handle twisted and I pulled the door back. And sure enough, that forever I was running towards was before me, although I would have never expected it to look quite like it did. Stepping through the doorframe, I looked around at the room. It felt off. The whole thing felt off. but it was almost blaze. A tunnel at the bottom of a sinkhole. A door. A room at the center of the earth. I didn't know how to process any of I had seen. It was like there was some underlying insanity I was meant to be taking part of, but like the room around me, I couldn't understand it. The four walls beyond the door that mimicked the world above. Each wall was crudely painted with vibrant greens and blue. All above the bottom portion of the wall, painted green with small blades of grass, sticking up and above it, an intense and deep blue that enveloped the green. Above me was a light bulb, humming away. I kept just looking around the room, waiting for anything to click, for some forbidden knowledge to climb out from inside the recess from my ethereal family line that would offer me an answer. I was like the smallest fish, unaware that the planet I lived on was about to be swallowed by the sun. I couldn't possibly begin to rationalize it. All I had known up to this was the small pond that I thought was my entire existence. If it wasn't for the table in the middle of the room, I would have no cause of action. It would have just let my mind break in two and stood there until death slipped through the door behind me. On the table, though, was a bowl that had a shallow pool of water at the bottom of it. I lifted my hand, the one with a small streak of drying blood on it, and pushed it into the water. I watched red tendrils of loose blood lifting off the surface of my skin and mingle with the water, causing a hazy, rusty liquid. Lifting from the water, my hand was covered in a thin film of tainted water, and suddenly my hand felt cold. Like before, a cold breeze wrapped around me, but this air, when I breathed it, it was so fresh. Fresh like I'd been standing in a field. As I lowered my hand, I looked to the room around me. There was no longer a room, just an expanse of green and lush grass that was being pushed by the same soft breeze. A sea of cloudless blue overhead, with a sound-drifting sun to illuminate the landscape around me. Looking down at my feet, I saw another drop of blood that's falling off my chin and landed on a blade of grass. Bending down, I placed 2 fingers around the blade of grass. I felt its grit and rolled it between my fingers. How? Looking behind me, I saw that the ball and the door I entered from had both vanished from sight. It was brighter and prettier, but it felt just like I did when I stood at the bottom of the sinkhole, unsure of where I was or what was around me. It sounded like the cave collapsed again, when I felt the ground beneath me shaking. It was enough to making standing difficult, as I had nothing to grab on, but no matter which direction I looked, I couldn't find the source of the timber. What other choice do you have? And keep walking. The grass under my feet was twisted and compressed as I stepped forward, trying to best to keep upright, fighting the constant shaking. There was a wave of air that felt like something had broken the sound barrier when it collided with me. It was strong pressure that nearly threw me off my feet, but I managed to keep walking forward. Exhausted and confused, afraid and without, I kept on. I should have been more afraid. What does it feel like when your understanding of the world snaps? When during my experience in that sinkhole, did a moment arise? Was it when I saw the other door, standing all alone in a great expansive field, just as I was? If I had entered through that door, maybe I could leave through one. Placing my hand on the doorknob, I hid off in the distance, past the horizon, the screaming inside the tunnel, except it was loud, choppy and almost animalistic, so full of mattering hatred that I barely recognized it. The scream developed into a growl that demanded my attention. My gaze shifted to look behind me. I don't remember turning my head. I just remember no longer looking at the door. Staring at the horizon, I watched something emerge. From far off, a massive entity lifted into view, or rather, what I assume to be very insignificant fraction of an entity. Something covered in very dark flesh rose further through the ground. Something covered in very dark flesh rose further, causing the ground to tremble more. My fingers were stuck. I couldn't move an inch against the commanding and horrific display before me. The dark entity started bloating out the blue sky, making it appear to be nearly night in the space it occupied. I could see smaller extremities extending off the monster, or whatever the hell that thing was. If I was a fish, that thing was a dying star. Small dark bits seemed to leave its body and hover around like crowds before they made contact with the tendrils, where they were absorbed back into its large mass. To a much larger mass. It was all I could think about. Its existence invaded every groove of my mind. Like the tendrils, it displayed while wrapping around me. For a moment, for a brief moment, I felt words from different languages fill my mind. Languages I never heard before, and some that I knew. The ones I did know were all the same words. So I assumed the unknown languages were receding the same. Hello? 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 I was stuck in the molasses, finally able to move my body, but those movements were so slow that I confined that it took all my energy just to turn the door's handle. I don't know how I knew, but I was aware that the thing was moving towards me. How big was it? How many planets could a thing devour in a single breath? How far away from the horizon was it? Its every breath was a wave of hot and stinging air that got harsher the closer it got. Pulling back the door, the room behind it was revealed to me. Despite it all being the only thing to exist in the field, there was still room through the frame. In the room, I discovered I was no longer alone in the field. A dark figure, similar to the shape of the Goliath behind me, was in the roof hunched by the wall. Small tendrils, reaching off his body, pressing against the wall where I watched them, bleeding color into the wall. The color shifted around, creating a picture on the walls. A picture that, as it came together, became familiar to me. I saw the ball in the middle of the room that one tendril from the humanoid featureless creature rested in. The ball was full, but as the color continued to spread onto the wall, I could see the water was draining. Once what I recognized as a New York City skyline had been fully realized on the wall, the creature turned its head back to me. Its movements were broken and reminded me of an old, corrupted VHS tape. Hello? It spoke. I'm not sure spoke is the right word, but the sound came out of it regardless of it was my voice or not. I couldn't even tell anymore. I had heard my voice repeated so much that it became meaningless to me. I could feel my body getting weak as I stumbled away from the door, making sure to swing it shut before falling backward, making that was the moment I snapped, laying on my back in the field with tears streaming down my face. I was surprised. I still had it in me to cry. I never had noises come out of my mouth as they did then. Choking whines of confusion and fear. Wholly convinced I was going to die, so far away from anything I understood, staring up at the sky, I watched the creature devouring the bright blue. I watched it, the way it determined cancer patients, watching the thin green line bounce up and down when they're all alone. Can I go now? I asked aloud to myself. I'm not sure anymore what I meant by that. Only after it was said, I was standing up again. The thing was getting closer, but it was just another thing. Just something else to put at my back. Because where I'm going is always in front of me, despite my pain in my wrist, the ache in my ribs, and the dried blood in my face. I find myself running again. Hey, at least I didn't need that heavy flashlight anymore. I ran in a straight line, just pushing through the field. Each breath, like I was breathing in silver. It's all about what's ahead of you and ahead of me. Were doors, hundreds of doors, standing in that field. Hundreds of otherworldly painters, pressing new entry doors to our world, onto the blank walls, and one of those entry points had to be close. You're not stupid. You're not powerless. You're here. If that's not where you want to be, move forward until you're there. Running from never approaching tide, of something far beyond my understanding. I occasionally stop to check the contents of the doors around me. Seeing those thin, inky creatures never failed to startle me. The ones that repeated my voice, to me being particularly hard to suffer though. I only needed to look for a moment though. If I didn't like the painting I saw, I would shut the door and move on. I could never shake the feeling of being watched as I ran through the field. Being watched by a predator is something humans seldom experience. One door, that's all it took, is one door to be the right door. Some doors were emptied with completed paintings, with blank walls waiting to be covered. And then I found my room, a picture already pressed onto 4 walls. I wasted no time entering the room. My heart was nearly ready to burst. I took a moment to catch breath as I dipped my hand into the water and looked behind me. Through the doorframe, I could see that a group of those human blotches of darkness had gathered and were all looking in my direction, unmoving. More importantly, in the sky blue once again, coming over the horizon. It dawned on me that the bright blue sky I had seen before wasn't the sky at all. It was one of the thing's eyes. The bright yellow sun, the center of his gaze. I could see another bright yellow orb in the middle of the re-emerging blue eye of the massive creation. The light grew brighter as the thing's pupil expanded. The feeling in my heart and my mind there was no doubt it was peering right at me. Hungry. It was hungry for me. There's no way a small fish can feed a star. It wanted was being me, what it was working for. The painting around me of a forest, recently ravaged by fire. One with a recently formed sinkhole. One on Earth. My fingers laced around the edge of the door as my other hands started lifting from the bowl of water. I made sure to look right at the thing, to let it know that for the briefest of moments, a minuscule human had defeated it. Funny, all it took to beat something so monstrous was to close the door in its face. As I started shifting back into my own world, I heard the creature speak once more. Like last time, I heard a line repeating in a very convincible language. On Earth, otherwise. Then there was a soft brown soil beneath my feet. I closed my eyes and fell to my knees, the gravity of sensation finally catching up with me after a very long fall. I heard leaves rustle and others ran over me, mentioning they had seen me falling into the hole. Odd how they answered my questions without even asking. It was real. Of course, it was real. I'm not a creative type. I've seen theories on the internet. Agartha, they call it. A place in the center of the earth. A hollow point. They're only half right. The earth is indeed hollow. At this center is a door to a room, and in that room, painted on the walls, It is what's really at the center of the earth. The center of it all. Agartha isn't a place. It's a name. Not for a creature. Not for a human. I can still hear the last thing it said to me before I made it back to the forest. The thing I know how to say in my language, my human tongue will permit me to speak. Agartha is the name of a god.